But how do we know when it's live?
It's live. We're
Now
live.
it's live.
Now it's live.
What's up, everybody?
When is now? Now is then. And
Chris, we're in the future.
Man, I was just talking about that movie. I need to watch that again. I haven't seen that movie in years.
Oh man, the radar's jammed. Yeah, no. Good stuff. So yeah, guys, we're hanging in the group here tonight for a little bit. We actually just got done recording an episode with Ryan, so that's cool. That'll be out, I don't know, in a week or two. When Michael gets around to editing it. So we'll see. We're getting very close to episode 50, which is hard to believe. We got episode 50 should be out right at the end of the month, which is awesome. That's we have some fun stuff to talk about in the real near future, maybe some possible giveaways and stuff like that, because that's what everybody's doing right now. We're trying to be as cool as Pooch and Chris are able. We're trying. We might not be, but we're trying.
We can't pull that kind of weight though, man. They're Pooch says, "Oh, I gotta go pick up my SD7." I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, I gotta go put gas in my car." Okay.
Oh man, well, Ryan and Eric, thanks for joining us. We're just for those who are watching, we're just hanging out tonight. If you guys got questions for us, questions for Ryan, for Michael, whatever, let's talk. And we're here to hang. Eric, what have you been doing during this time of this craziness?
Well, it was I went to California for spring break, and then I never really came back. I did come back. It's just school didn't happen when I got back. So oh, good, you're drinking wine, so I can drink my beer there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're drinking.
Yep.
And it's Brooklyn beer. So I think, Michael, that's your. It doesn't matter. I'm not gonna do the advertising for good. School didn't really happen, so I tried to teach 6 classes online out of nowhere, which in our business is kind of difficult. How do you teach a console class over the internet?
Ask Ryan. He's actually doing a class. I'm at 45. Actually, this is right up his alley.
to people that have never used a console before. So that was fun. So some of the classes worked out, but some were pretty rough. And then I've got a 4-year-old. So and my wife is also a college teacher. So my wife would be having Zoom, and I'd be having Zoom, and my daughter would just like bounce between us. And it's been, I love my daughter, and it's fun, but it's crazy. And so that's what I've been doing. And there has not been a moment of boredom. A lot of people have been binging on the internet and binging on Netflix and all that. I've had no time. It's just been crazy. So.
Eric, you very kindly invited me to sit in on your lecture on distortion a couple weeks ago.
Uh-huh.
Thank you for that. Oh, there's Hannah. Oh man, I feel like I should go put my Rational Acoustics shirt on. I feel left out here. You had a really cool demonstration that you did where you talked about intermodulation distortion, and you showed power chords and why they don't put the thirds in the power chords because of the difference tones that you're generating.
Yep.
Which is a really interesting way of showing that I've never thought about before, and I think that was just it's been stuck in my head. It was a cool demonstration that you did, so it kind of stuck with me, man.
Thank you. I don't know where I'd come across that nugget of knowledge. It might have been the internet, but obviously it was it totally makes sense. I was doing some guitar overdubs last week. I play guitar, but not really, and I found it interesting how different guitar voicings on different guitars with different distortion sounds, you can actually use the third and get you can get beating that sounds kind of good, but at least on that particular demo, putting the third in was just pretty horrible. And I think that's why the root fifth has always been so consistent in that style of music.
I think that's the excuse that the guitar players use, so not have to worry about the difference between major chords and minor chords. I think they don't want. I think they don't want to. Shots fired at the guitar player. No, I thought it was cool. I was a little concerned for your Mac, though. I thought it was going to melt down during the stream.
That was a rough one. Yeah, that was asking a lot of it at once. There were 2 Macs going at once. But thank you.
So I was looking back at some pictures from AES, the system optimization panel, and it's weird because I looked at pictures, and sitting behind me was a front of house engineer that I would work with on a one-off about 3 weeks after that, which is like the weirdest thing that he was there. And so it was just kind of like one of those small world things. Ryan, question for you.
Yeah.
You have the Tovlo, the Moments video, the Vivo video on your website. Is that board? Is that a board mix, or was that multi-track then mixed later?
I think that was a board to mastering.
Cool.
If I recall right, that one's pretty bright, right?
I didn't watch it yet, but I was about to. She's got a great one of Not on Drugs that was on a TV show, and it was just her and two guys doing the SPDs, and that I love that one. That's a lot of fun.
Was that the one you sent me?
Yeah, I sent it to Hannah because I was trying to. We were talking about vocal effects live and how to do stuff that makes it sound big but not like processed. Doesn't have that like digital over compressed sound to it, but so it's got space and it breathes and it sounds nice, and it's like it's a 58. You know what I mean? It's like it was just a really nice example of what you can do when you really put the time in and pay attention to that.
Yeah.
So Michael,
I mean, it certainly helps.
Good.
Oh, I was going to say, it certainly helps that she's a fantastic vocalist. So there's that too.
Well, I was gonna mention that. I mean, you can't really ignore stuff like mic technique when you're trying to do such elaborate processing. I mean, that stuff to me is so sensitive, to the handling and stuff. And that's that's a situation. I had to have the conversation with when I have instrumentalists who sing backgrounds and stuff like that. They feel like if they feel like they're too loud in their own mix because they're singing backgrounds, they'll pull off the mic, and what they don't realize is
back off,
that just fills the sound out front with just a bunch of bleed. So that's
one
not
of the things
the...
that really helps. One of the things that really helps on that gig though was that the stage volume was really low. There was a lot of electronic sounds, a lot of stuff like that, and there was 2 drum kits, but they weren't really nuts. So because of that, I could send her tons of effects and not about those effects really screwing up the rest of the instruments because there wasn't so much bleed on it.
Yeah.
In my more recent gigs, trying to get away with the same kind of thing, I had a bunch of background vocalists on my tour last year, and I ended up cheating a little bit, and I would put a gate on the effect send. So that if a singer, spoke quietly, it was fine. It was like they were speaking or whatever. But when they were singing through, if they stopped singing and maybe drums are bleeding into their mic, it wouldn't open that gate because the gate was keyed off of a range that drums wouldn't really be in, like the 500 to 700 range. So I snuck my way around, still putting tons of effects on background vocals, even on a stage that had a bunch of bleed.
That's pretty neat. What are you doing? So in terms of gating your toms, what's your strategy for the sidechain filtering there? Because one thing that does not work as well as people think for me is filtering in on the fundamental of the tom, because that's where the ringing is going to be when it's not being played. So what's been your approach with that?
I have a weird approach to that. So first of all, if I don't have the time, I will just get the gate dialed in, try and find a drum fill, and I'll do this in virtual soundcheck because it's easier than doing it during the show. I will try and find a drum fill where they actually play all the toms, and I will loop that on my virtual soundcheck, and I'll listen to, let's say, tom 1 only, and I'll listen for the frequencies that only cut when that one's being hit. And usually it's pretty obvious. You can hear it quite clearly. So I turn on the key listen, so I'm listening to only the key, and kind of tweak it till it only opens for that moment, and then dial that one to that, and then do the same thing for tom 2, same thing for tom 3. I have a lot of time. That's where I get really good, and I take my tom channels, and I put extreme EQs that just look like spikes, and basically make them seem like triggers, and put incredibly tight gates on it, or even something like a transient designer. Use that to key the actual tom channel, not EQ'd like crazy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, because I've done the same thing for drum replacement in the studio, where I got somebody did a pair of overheads on their drum kit, and they were like, well, "We don't like the tom sound." I'm like, "Well, I'm not surprised that you don't like the tom sound." But what I ended up doing was copying that overhead out and going in with a super high Q and literally making triggers out of each tom's fundamental and then running those into the replacement. And that it felt a little dirty, but it worked. So
I've done many times.
The thing is, you can do the same thing live. It's just an extreme thing, and it takes time. And usually live, we don't have that kind of time. And the drum kit might be slightly different tuned every day, even if you're on a tour.
Right.
So that resonance is something you have to find again every day.
And I will confess that I don't often go for gates. Part of it is that I'll do a lot of one-off throw and goes or a couple shows. It takes a lot of time to chase that threshold where it's opening when it's supposed to, but it's not opening when it's not supposed to. And to me, that's a big time sink if you're not careful. And the other thing that I really don't like is when that gate opens up, you're letting in all that cymbal bleed, and it's very unpleasant sounding to me. So I gravitate toward expanders if I need the control of some dynamics there. Then it's pushing it down, and it's not a violent unmute as much as kind of a fading up. And it doesn't sound like it damages the transient as much. That's sort of been my go-to approach when I have to do something like that for toms.
Yeah, annoyingly, I like really loud toms. I like when tom fills happen. They're just like this.
I love giant loud toms.
Yeah, so I have to get it super dialed in. I did steal something from a bunch of metal engineers. So metal engineers are really, really good with this, especially guys. They're really on it. And they do really sneaky stuff. Like a tom in general only needs top end for the first, 50 milliseconds, maybe 100.
Right.
And then after that, it's the body of it, right? So I know guys that will take a duplicate tom track, invert the polarity, and set their gate so that it opens only after 100 milliseconds.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then they'll, high pass it. So it's only taking out the top end, but it only happens after the hit happens. Crazy stuff.
There is a fantastic new plugin, the Sonics drum gate that came out a couple months ago, and I'm mixing a record right now, and first time I've used this gate. It's the first noise gate in my life that I like. I mean, I like the Drummer DS201. It's a nice gate. It kind of reminds me of the old days. But this, and what's cool about the this Sonics gate is that you can actually do that. You can have it open up. You can control its release time for different frequencies, and it shows up like
that's awesome.
It shows up as a little spectrograph.
I saw that, man. That was wild. That's awesome.
I'm not kidding you, man. You just turn the thing on and it works. I don't know if it's available for live. I don't know what the latency would be like in the real world, but in the studio, it was like, oh my God, I can actually use this. And then I went and edited out all the toms anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say, on records, I manually edit the toms anyways, because what is it, maybe 100?
Yeah.
But it was still, I don't usually edit out. I try not to gate kicks and snares usually in a studio world, but it can be nice to tighten the drum up a little bit, like tighten the release time on it. Yeah. And that was a perfect. Anyway, just a plug for that. Check that one out, because you can do that frequency releasing thing.
That's wild. I think I want to just take a run through the chat real quick. Kyle says he's picking up his mower. So that's that's where he is. Chris Tenturas says, I love all you people. We love you too, Chris. And it's alarming that Chris still wants to hang out with me after working with me all day. But here he is. And he just ordered himself a new computer. So as soon as that comes in, he'll have a webcam, and he's got a fancy new SM7B, and he'll be able to come and join us.
Nice.
And Eddie Kaipo says, hey, everybody. So, hey, Eddie. Eddie, you're the man, dude. Eddie, you're the man.
Eddie loves gates too, apparently, he says. Yeah, also, people watching, please feel free. We're just hanging out. There's no agenda, so feel free to ask us questions. Yep. If you guys been listening, we appreciate the listenership. We're getting pretty close to 50 episodes here. So we love we want to make this just as much for you guys as it is for us. I mean, I know Michael, Kyle, and I, we would sit here and talk to all those people regardless whether y'all listen. So the fact that y'all want to listen as well is kind of cool. It's just an added bonus. So
Tell Eddie I just sent him the link if he wants to jump in here, and I texted it to him.
Sweet.
Oh, that would be fun.
Eddie, come on, man, jump in here with us, brother. No, and you know, it's sort of one of the things that we talked about on the episode that we just recorded tonight with Ryan, which you folks will be able to hear shortly in a couple of weeks, is about that conversation with the artist. Yeah, he said, if you don't mind me joining briefly. Of course not, Eddie. Get in here, man. No, you know, he had a great thing that he told us about on Eddie's episode, which if you folks haven't listened to it, go listen to it. It's fantastic. You know, he was told over and over again, oh, this artist, they don't know what they want. They don't know what they want. And he said, well, I'm going to give them a chance. And we were talking about Enrique, I think. And he actually knew exactly what he wanted. So I think part of that dialogue is, you know, like you were talking about, Ryan. I mean, these people have spent their entire careers, and a lot of them have a very good idea of what they want exactly. And so,
right.
You know, why don't we just start there before we, you know, second guess that?
And it may just be that they don't know how to put it in words, right?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, at least not the words we understand as audio.
Eric, that brings up a good question for you. Would be, you know, from a schooling side, for those who don't know, so you teach at a school. You know, we talked about in actually our episode that we just recorded tonight with Ryan before we got on here of the relationship that you have to have with an artist, and the way you have to talk to them, the way you have to, you know, listen to, you know, look, they've created this art, right? We're just the ones that have to sit there and translate that and not impose ourselves onto them. Is there an aspect of your teaching that goes to teaching that relationship and empathy and how to speak professionally to an artist or to a client? So how does that work for you?
I think to some degree, yes, it is. There's only so much that can happen in 4 years, especially in the 4 years, which basically someone's going from age 17 to age 21. They're doing a lot of other things in their lives. So trying to make them a professional in that amount of time can be kind of difficult. But later, I mean, our program's kind of unique. It is a 4-year live sound program. And certainly in the senior year, what Hannah's about to go into, the last 2 semesters of the in the major specific courses, spend a lot of time talking about clients. We do an analysis. The students are all producing shows. They're we use the term systems. They're kind of production managers for the event. And we, after each event, in class, we discuss the problems they encountered and how it was working with the artists or with the other people on the production, the problems they encountered. I also have them reading Jim Yakubuski's book, which is I really like. He talks a lot about
professional sound reinforcement techniques.
Yeah,
Great book.
I really like that book. We don't do enough of it, I guess, is the answer that you're looking for. We obviously talk about clients. I think on the recording side of the program, they talk about it as well, dealing with artists in the studio. But you're dealing with young people that can barely make headphone mixes, can barely get the preamp set correctly, and trying to get them to that. I try to prepare them to shut their mouths, to be in starting positions where they're going to learn that by watching the pros later on. You really can't get them ready to be an independent. Some of them will dive right into being independent contractors and will have success. But in general, they need to do a fair amount of growing after school. Does that cage the answer without?
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I mean, I wasn't necessarily expecting one. I was just curious to see, part of that approach. I mean, I know, just in general in this industry, I mean, let's face it, we're in a service industry, just in a different format, right? So, and, customer service means different things, everything from, relationships to talking to your stagehands, to talking to your artist, to all those things. And that's a big thing that, like, not burning bridges, all of those types of things. So,
speaking of that, Eddie, what's up, brother?
How you guys doing?
How you doing, man? It's good to see you.
Oh, just jumping in, man. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, this is the topic that you're an expert in this topic, because you get a lot of FaceTime directly with the artist you're working with, mixing monitors for a lot of high profile acts. And so, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? You know, when they're asking for something and they maybe don't know the way to express it in a way that makes sense to an audio engineer, and you know, helping them feel relaxed when you're
when they want it to be purple.
Yeah. So how do you work through that?
You know, I have met a lot of people who kind of dismiss it. They go, "Oh man, these people are just." I think you were mentioning that earlier while I was scrambling to get my headphones set. It's true. I think dismissing them it's a problem. I think we need to change a little bit of that and try to like acknowledge whatever they tell us. We have to figure it out. I think our job is to figure out, to interpret what they're saying. And I know I made those examples before of like, oh, you know, I want to be blue, purple, yellow. And of course that's an extreme, but there are instances that happens, you know, but I just have to interpret it. I just have to like, and start trying things. I'm like, oh, so how about this? Is this any better? And if that actually fixes something, then I go, okay, that's what he meant or she meant by this. Right. And I'll put that on my little notebook or mental notebook. And I go, okay, every time they say something like this is along the lines like Enrique, and I think this is a fairly common word. He says clarity for high end, which to me, it makes total sense. But for other people, it didn't. Like he was like, I'm always wanting clarity, and they don't understand. I was like, that to me means you want a little brighter. And he does like his stuff a little brighter than most. But, you know, but that also lets him, when that's something we discussed before, it lets him run his pack a little quieter than most also. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, just learning how to interpret that, you know.
And I would suggest, and maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't, that being able to have that conversation and to try things out and to have that relationship with the artist is more important than being able to decode the feedback on the first time.
Having that trust, developing that trust. Like a lot of times, them knowing that you're standing there, just they might freak out about something that is happening, and they turn around and they see you and they know that you're doing your thing, you're taking care of them, and then they don't even worry about it. They move on. They know you're there. It's not a sub. It's not anybody they have to worry about, because you know you could have a sub who's absolutely capable, and you know because you have to go, you're having a baby, whatever the reason, and they're going to be worried about that just because it's not us personally. You know, you develop that trust. They know that everything's going to be fine, and even though you can give people notes and they're going to do everything exactly as you said it, and you give them your file and all that stuff, which is a whole other subject too, but they just need to know that you're there, and that makes them more comfortable, I believe. You know. Yeah,
I'm wondering if any of you guys have run into this. I've seen this. It hasn't happened necessarily to me, but I've seen it happen to other engineers that I know. You know, you get put into a scenario, kind of like you said, a sub, where maybe so say a modern engineer, front house engineer, specifically, I know this happened twice to two different modern engineers. You're coming in behind an engineer who has been there for a long time, right? And the reason in both scenarios that I'm thinking of, the engineer had to leave for whatever reason. Doesn't matter whatever reason to leave. He wasn't fired, right? Like the artist didn't actually want the person to have to leave, or for whatever reason they had other obligations, right? The next person that comes in, almost always, in both these scenarios, was like, I don't want to say set up to fail, but like you're in a bad spot, right? Like
you're in the lion pit.
Like to no fault of your own, you now are basically having to fill someone else's shoes. Someone, you know, the band is out of their comfort zone, and twice I've seen that person fall, not because of anything they ever did, but because they almost needed a scapegoat to get to the next thing. Have you guys had to deal with that relationship of coming out of not because you were called on because, hey, I want to go to you, but because you had to kind of maybe fill someone else's shoes and it wasn't expected? Like what was that like if you had to do something like that?
Well, I mean, in this, a lot of the parallels can be made to a one-off where the band is like, who the hell is this person, right? And I'm trusting my sound to them, or I'm trusting my show to them tonight. I don't know anything about them. I try to, during the advancing process, open a dialogue and make sure that when they show up at the venue, they're aware that, you know, they're not talking to someone who doesn't care. But, you know, and this is a conversation that Hannah and I have had a lot where, you know, she walks into a venue and you have a band there and they take one look at you and they may decide that you don't know what the hell you're doing for for any number of reasons. So Eddie, what are some sort of defense mechanisms to start building that relationship, even if it's like a one-off? I mean, how do you convince someone that you're on their side, so to speak?
Yeah, it's a good question. You kind of have to, if you're allowed to even interact with that particular artist at that time because you're the new guy or you're the guy for that day, you just have to go right at it. I think if you hide and they see a little bit of that insecurity, you're toast. Yeah, because I think it's more important that we always gonna get a little bit nervous and like it's my first day and like, you know what's gonna happen, even though we've been doing this for a long time, and that's what keeps us on our toes and also keeps us learning and keeping up with everything. But what's important, I think, is if they ask you for something, they don't see you frantic. Oh, what is or when they come to talk to you, you don't freak out, you don't become a fan, or you don't become like just nervous because the boss is talking to you from the get-go. On day one, you kind of like, yeah, what do you need? Okay, cool. Let me know how this works, or like, even if you're dying inside, you kind of have to show them that you're confident. Yeah, because I know it's funny, but it's true. I've done gigs where I was like, oh my God, I'm like, am I going to do this right? Am I going to nail it? And I'm not a perfectionist. So I'm always like, it has to be perfect or I'd rather not do it. Right. So but perfect for me is not perfect for everybody else. Right. So anyway, so people might just go, they come and talk to you. You just got to be assertive, even if inside you're like dying of nerves. That's what I've learned throughout the years. You just got to show them that you're in your game and you're there to take care of them and they're in good hands. I had to do that even with a concert that I never touched before.
Right.
They never knew that.
I they can't know that.
And they can't know that.
And there's another thing Ryan said to me like 10 years ago. I'm going to start a date calendar of stuff that Ryan O'John said to me 10 years ago. But one of the things he said is the artist can't know you had a problem.
No,
right.
When they get on stage, it's just got to be perfect. So even if you're
someone like Enrique, he likes to know. Like if he says,
you tell them after.
Of course. But a lot of times the artists ask you if something's going on, even if it's like he takes a glance and they're fixing a pedal over there. He wants to know, and he'll go to the talker and say, "What's going on?" And he wants an answer, and I'll tell him, "It's something with the guitar. Don't worry about it. We got you." And I try to be short and go. I don't go, "Whoa, no explanation." It's like boom, and then he'll move on.
Yeah.
If he hears in my voice that there's something worse or there's something going on,
something to be worried about.
Oh yeah, then the band will start looping. And he won't go back until I give him an answer because he wants to know. He's very involved in that way. But there, like my first show with Christina, I was supposed to have a profile, and I'm being flown all the way to Morocco to do it. And I get there, and it's a SD7, which I'm not a digital guy, so I don't use them. I'm not familiar with them. It doesn't mean that I can't mix on them. It just means that I'm gonna be doing my first gig, with a band that I don't know, with an artist that I don't know, and I'm going to be completely lost. So I'm like, okay, I can't do that. So once I found out, I'm in my hotel room and I'm downloading the offline software and I'm like going through it and just making, okay, I get this, I understand this. And then when I arrived the next morning, I told the local guy, I said, look, this is not a console that I use, but I kind of need this routed this way. If you can do this for me, program it for me, and then I'll take over. Okay. And then I might have a bunch of questions today. And I got only a few hours before they show up.
Eddie.
Yeah.
One of the things outside of you being a smashing engineer itself,
please.
The other thing that you have that I don't see a lot of people have though is your demeanor is just so calm about everything. When things are high stress, you're calm. When things go wrong, you're calm. But on top of that, there's a special way that you ask questions, right? When you ask a question, there's a way to ask it that implies knowledge, and there's a way to ask it that kind of implies you have no idea what's going on, right?
Yeah.
And if you're trying to build trust quickly, when you ask questions of your artists, like, what do you think? Sorry, my dogs are going nuts down here. They're playing with each other. Can you hear it?
Yeah.
All good.
But when you ask questions, But when you ask questions and you like imply that you understand what the needs are and what the desires are, an artist's going to trust you a lot more than you go, what do you want? Because when you ask something like that, they don't understand that you have any understanding of their needs, first of all, and how to achieve them.
Mm-hmm.
So like understanding how to ask the questions like really affects your ability to build trust. And that's something you have down like I can't even explain how well you have that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a work in progress, man. I always got, different artists react different to different things that I say. There's been times where I try to apply that psychology with another artist, and it there's a left turn, a major left turn there. So then you get thrown a curveball, So and that's what I was saying too, that I was thrown in the lion pit. Oh, there it is. In the lion pit with a console that I don't know, and all of a sudden I start getting asked all these things. I can almost certainly guarantee you that no one in the band, and which I was meeting for the first time as well, and the artist, which in this case was Christina, I don't think they ever knew that I was using that console probably for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And they never knew, because at that point I familiarized myself with what I needed to know, how my cues work, of course, EQing, compressing, all the stuff. I had all that dialed already, but it was more about not that I acted that I knew that board in and out, because that would be lying, but I never showed them that I was like, every now and then I'll have to, okay, where is that? Where, as you know, Ryan, I'm an avid guy, so for me, I can close my eyes and I know where everything is.
Right.
There's a big difference. I had to pretend that I was able to do that without lying, without just saying, oh yeah, I use this every day, when it's not true. But I had to show them that I knew what I was going to do for that night. I got you. They never knew that it was my first night.
I mean, first and foremost, you're an engineer. Second, you're an avid guy. Maybe third, you're an avid guy.
Yeah. Well, it's true. I mean, I so it's those things that you were asking about. How do you build trust? You just gotta show them confidence without being cocky. Yeah.
So Eddie, so at the other end of the spectrum, something like the residency, Gwen, the residency, same show, same everything. You know what I mean? Night after night after night. I mean, how much communication do you have on an ongoing basis, both with Gwen and with Jim out at front of house? I mean, what, you guys just do your thing, or are you still talking, and what's that dialogue like?
Oh yeah, we I tend to always create, like Ryan was saying, I'm able to establish a relationship with my artists, which I think is absolutely necessary, and especially as a monitor engineer, and I have full access to go and talk to, of course, Gwen and ask her whatever is needed, or check in on her and make sure she's okay, and with Jim the same. Like, even though it's the same routine when we do the residency, we always trying to make it better or improve something, or if something wasn't quite as we wanted it to be, we'll talk about, say, what do you think? Is it, should we change it to this, or should we try this instead? Should we move this mic over here? We don't try to reinvent it, but we always try to improve something, that if something came up, So, and with Jim, I was just talking to him on Zoom about an hour ago. And yeah, I mean, communication among the engineers, absolutely key. And then with the artist, because he doesn't have the relationship with Gwen that I have.
Right.
So for, physically, he's far away. And also he came, I had 3 years ahead of him, with her. So, you build that trust and everything, and you kind of relay it too. You kind of, if I'm talking to Gwen and she was concerned about something from the house related, I'm like, don't worry, you're in good hands. We got a great team, and you reinforce that as well. It's not just me. I'm cool. I got you. I don't know over there. And I've been in camps that it's been like that. It's like, oh, I don't know. I mean, we were good here. I think that issue was related somewhere over there. And that's horrible. That's a horrible way of being and living and also being professionally. So I don't like to do that. I like to kind of keep everybody working together, backline and audio, the audio team and video, and band members, dancers. Everybody needs to be taken care of. They're all part of the show. Everybody's contributes in their way with their skill, and it goes around like that, I think.
Well, it's so interactive too. I mean, if things get loud on stage, or if you have something ringing or taken off, you got issues with your monitor system, you can cause a real headache for front of house. And if front of house gets too loud, I mean, they can screw stuff up for you. So so that dynamic is something I did, and I usually I'm usually not on rigs big enough where that is as much of a factor. But I recently did a pretty loud metal show, and I was more than I was on the Q edge, I was on the comms with the front of house guy, because both of our systems were just right on the edge, and they just wanted it super, super loud. And so that really took a lot of communication to make sure that, we're not fighting each other in that way.
And it affects Gwen. Ultimately, we did have issues. It was unfortunate because they were like, sometimes, production or, promoters, they want the volume louder.
Yep.
And they will come to front of house and say it needs to be louder. And front of house, the other front of house engineers before Jim also, they were like, we're at a good place. Like, this is a good level. We're not breaking anybody's ears, and we're not, too quiet. Everything feels good, and they're not louder. And they will go louder, and all of a sudden, I start feeling it backstage, but not in a good way, because I like feeling front of house. I use front of house mixes to complement my ears,
Yeah.
So without it, it almost, I need to EQ it differently on the low end. But so not having that, or having too much of it, it was a problem. And sadly, it was reflecting on them, which it wasn't their fault. They were just following orders in a way, So, go ahead.
No, so that brings up a good point of saying how much you rely on the PA to kind of fill things in. Have you noticed a change over the years with the introduction of cardioid subs and different PAs that do like this maximum rejection behind the PA and stuff? How much has that affected you as a monitor engineer with some of these systems now coming out where, from the artist experience, it's actually probably absolutely changing? I mean, it's helping out front of house, but at the same time, how much is that maybe affecting the artist? Some in good ways, I'm sure, but how's it affecting you?
Sometimes I like it and sometimes I don't, because I like to feel it, not only for my sake being there, but I know the musicians do too. There's been times where we're rehearsing and then the subs, Brad is like, okay, you guys are playing all these songs running through the set 2-3 times. I had it already by the third song. I'm just going to lower the volume of the PA or turn it off. And he stays with his near fields, dialing things up. And all of a sudden, I'm like, oh, something's going on. And then I can hear band members start going to talk back. Can I get more bass? Can I get more kick? All of a sudden, and these are mixes that have been there for years now at this point. That is like, come on. Something happened. Of course, I'm like, Brad, and I on the talk back. It's like, Brad, come on.
Turn the PA back on. It's funny. That's a scenario. That's a scenario I've been in a million times too. After a couple hours of rehearsal, I don't need the rig on. I've got my near fields, and I also want to shut it off.
Only. Sometimes I tell them turn the subs on only.
Yeah. And then of course Monder says, I need this back on. But the comment Chris just made, it reminds me of the first time I did a show on GSO, and we were touring.
Speaking of which, my buddy Chris Leonard, and not myself, but you can't see.
Oh, is that other Chris Leonard?
That's other Chris Leonard. Says his band loves DMB, GSO.
So the first time I ever did a gig on GSO, between one of the songs, my artist goes over to the monitor guy and goes, "Does he have the PA on? He needs to turn this up," because she had never had so little back pressure. She was so used to it, and she's so used to relying on it. So PM comes out to front house. He goes, this sounds pretty good. Like, what are you at? And I was like, I'm at 100A on the dot. And he goes, can you give her a little more? Because I think she needs some. I was like, are you sure? And he's like, yeah. Kicked it up a notch. He's like, okay, this really hits. And he went back, and they were like, no, I still don't feel it. So actually, after that, we ended up putting side fills in with just basically low, mid, and lows to make sure that they'd get some on stage. It was crazy. It was crazy.
It works. With Gwen, for instance, we only have side fills, and they used to be like a wall. And I'm like, the first thing I did was remove them because she doesn't use them. They're just for the dancers. So I just made them smaller, more compact, plenty loud for them, and it doesn't interfere with her sound either, But I think it's important to have that balance, though, because if, too much, it's just overwhelming, and then you're fighting. Everybody starts turning the pack up, or then now they're getting fatigued. Now everything just doesn't sound right. there's a balance. And as long as you have the communication with front of house and you can talk it out and everything's cool, at the end of the day, it's for the benefit of the artist. You know, I can't put my taste in front of the artist, and front of house shouldn't either, you know?
Right. Absolutely.
And Eddie, that was one of the, I know you got to go cook dinner, but you know, before you go, one of the best tips that you ever gave me from the article you wrote about using the high pass, using the low shelf cut on the in-ears mixes, and letting that low frequency stuff that's on the stage, letting that work for you. And boy, that really cleans up the ears, especially if you don't have really, really high end in-ears that, you know, don't have 8 different drivers in them, you know, to try to get 40 hertz out of an in-ear, single way in-ear can cause some other problems. So as soon as I started doing that, letting that sub energy work and kind of just rolling that out of my mixes, you know, my artists were a lot happier after that. So
yeah, it makes a big difference. It makes a big difference, and you get more headroom to turn up the other stuff, you know? You're getting that other energy, all that low energy
exactly
from someone else, you know?
Yep. Yeah, so it was a great tip, man. Thank you.
Oh, you got it. Anytime.
Thanks for hanging with us, Eddie. Appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. I want to go make some Thai food for the family now.
Always good to see you, bud.
Bye, Eddie. All right, so let's put Hannah and Eric on the spot now, I think.
Yes.
So Hannah, you actually, today is a good time that you just got your grades finishing the semester. So, you know, if you're looking back on the audio education that you've undergone thus far, I mean, what was the big game changer moment for you? I'm sure there was at least one thing where you totally were like, wow, that's just rocked my world. Because I have a bunch of little moments like those. Can you share one? And then maybe Eric, maybe from your perspective, you know, those light bulb moments for your students. What are some of those ones were the common ones?
Okay, so
Eric's got time to think now.
Eric taught this class. Last fall, I took a speaker systems class, and he did a demo about point source arrays. And that was a really, really big moment for me, seeing how to build one and actually doing it in class. That was like oh my God, this is amazing moment. And I told him that before.
Is that when you went like, okay, I'm going to be a system tech? Was that where that? Because you've kind of shifted, like even in the time that we've been friends, you went from like, yeah, I mix, I'm kind of interested in the system tech thing, and now you're like, no, I'm a system tech. Like, you really found your identity in that.
Throughout last fall, I kind of made that transition. I knew that I liked the topic beforehand, probably starting in the spring, I'd say. But that class really like changed my entire course. I'm like, this is what I want to do now.
Well, I got to tell you, Eric, I don't know what you've done, but I mean, it's not often that I'll get a text at 11:30 at night saying, okay, we have to talk about DFTs tomorrow because I'm really trying to understand data windows. I'm like, no one has ever, that doesn't happen.
Well, as I've said before, you really can't judge your typical 20-year-old audio student by Hannah.
No.
Hannah's and I've taught that class, I think 7 or 8 years now. And I've had a few people that definitely want to system engineer that really get into it, but Hannah by far has invested her time in that. So she's exceptional in that regard. And that's the aha moment. And I don't, Hannah, I mean, I obviously remember that moment, but I don't remember it for you.
I mean, there were all of us.
I mean, how could you?
Like, and you know, my program's small enough that I do remember aha moments for particular people. I remember we were mixing the Cashman show down at wherever we were, Sanford, somewhere a couple years ago, and you were sitting next to me in front of house, and that was kind of an aha moment for you.
Yes, it was. That whole day was definitely an aha moment.
There are, for young people, the aha moments come in different places. Sometimes there's a younger one when I have to compete to get students because they all want to go make records and make beats. And so I kind of have to very clearly target students that I think would want to go into live audio. And then early on, I will throw a young person on a console in a performance environment, even though they have no idea what they're doing. I'm like, mix this show. And it's at school, and it doesn't really matter. There'll be a band on stage, and there's 12 people in the audience. It doesn't really matter. But that moment, and you can give that to, because I remember doing that. I fell into live audio when I was 14, 15. And I remember there was nothing cooler than the first time I got to put a kick drum in the mains at age 15. And to give that to a student, that's an aha moment. And I can definitely think of many times students have that. Later in their schooling, though, as they start to mature, you hopefully want to see other aha moments, like the system engineering moment, or the first time as they get more sophisticated in their mixing, or they get more sophisticated. Some students, a lot of my students want to get into production management, and that when they well, it's not all forms of production management, from promoting to that a lot of students realize they don't actually want to mix, or they don't want to do the competitive thing of trying to be a successful mixer. They see other students in their cohort being better mixers, and they start looking for other things to do, and production management's one of them. And some students are really proud and have an aha moment when they run their first show. When they advance it, the artist comes in, everything goes well. They our event leads actually tech the PA as well. They're in charge of, they're kind of like the system engineer and production management together. And they're very proud after that. I've had many students reference that after the fact.
I think I had that moment. I work at a small 200 cap venue in the same town that my school's in. I kind of had that moment the first time that I advanced my own show and had it happen successfully, and have the artist come up to me and be like, that went great, take my card type of thing. Like, I think that was another really big moment for me, was having that first really successful show all the way through.
And sometimes it's really small. I mean, teaching, you all have probably taught one time or another, in one form or another. You live for the moment of the aha moment. It's a very gratifying moment for the teacher to see that happen. And sometimes it's very small. Like one of my favorite classes to teach is a sophomore level console class. We try to front load the console stuff so that they can get the basics and signal flow down early on the program, so then they can grow on and do other things. And in this class, it's kind of divided in half. It's very hands-on. The first half, we learn a basic console. Currently, it's the Midas M32. And then the second half of the semester, they learn a Yamaha CL3. And it's basically the same exact material for a whole semester, but two different desks. And to see them really struggle in their first practical exam, like trying to figure out basic concepts between pre and post fader, or AFL, PFL, when do I cue at the input, when do I cue at the output, those kind of basic things. And then to see them actually get it later in the semester, that's very gratifying, because you see the whole arc of their learning. Those small aha moments, maybe they're not as big as sitting at a desk in front of an audience, but they're really satisfying for me, and I think they're satisfying for them, because they see growth, and then they're encouraged to tackle the harder things.
And I think, I was talking to Ethan Weiner the other day about, when he has folks over to his house to record, and he says, he's like, I just get so nervous that something's going to break, and, they're paying me, and I can't handle the pressure. He's like, I don't know how you do live shows. I just wouldn't be able to handle it. And I think fundamentally you either feed off that, or you're so scared of it that you won't go anywhere near it. And there's such a big divide there, and I think back to when I'm doing, musical theater stuff, where it's just line by line for two, just the amount of concentration is unrivaled, and you're just, sweating for 2 hours, and it's super stressful. And then you get home and you're like, man, that was so fun. I can't wait to do it again tomorrow. And it's just like, that's not normal, So I think it takes a special, that in and of itself, I think, is a moment for people when they go like, wow, I love this. And, I'm not content to do it in the studio. The studio is not as exciting. I think that's a different breed. It's a different kind of rush, so to speak.
I have a lot of conversations with, because we have like a studio program and a live program. I have a lot of conversations with my friends who are in the studio program, and there's something they just don't get about like the stressful situation, and exactly what you were just saying. They don't understand the rush that comes from that.
Yep. No, that's exactly what it is. And it's sort of, you sort of almost become so comfortable with it after a while that I have this idea that I call the Halls effect. And it's when someone opens a Halls cough drop during a movie and it pulls you right out of the movie. And you start to go, I'm sitting in a theater watching a movie, right? You become very self-aware in that moment. And I did that to myself during a show back in the old days of yore when we had shows. I was mixing and I'm just doing my thing. And it's a venue I've worked in a bazillion times. And for some reason, something in the audience caught my eye and I kind of like zoomed out to behind my own head. And I was like, wow, all of these people are like totally focused on this right now. And I could totally screw this up. Like I went back to my very first moment ever at a soundboard. And I kind of had that moment of fear all over again, like 15 years later, which was really silly. But, I think it really, you can mix multi-tracks all you want in your bedroom, but the first time you get in front of a console in a show and there's people in the room listening, I mean, that is a unique brand of fear that I think, there's no way to prepare for that. And
to be honest, it's almost like a drug, though.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
Especially when you go from, doing 300 seats and people get really excited to suddenly realizing that there are more people behind you than there are in front of you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you're in the middle of an ocean of 50,000 seats. And some moment happens on stage and all the hair on your arm stands up and you feel this emotion. And it's something that can't really be replicated in any other way. I mean, there were a couple of years where I tried to do just mixing records, and I realized how antisocial that is.
Yeah,
I was sitting in a studio in the dark with no windows for many hours. I'd send off a mix that I thought was perfect. It would come back with some comments, and even when it was perfect, it went out, and I never got to see the response of people listening to it.
Yep.
They'd go listen to it. Maybe there'd be some review online. But it's a different thing when you have this one fader and you go like that and you suddenly see everyone go, "Wah!" It's a really different experience. It's a different kind of emotional rush, and you really do start getting addicted to it. And then, if it goes away like it does now, you have a hard time trying to find that same kind of excitement.
So I mean that's an example of it on the big, awesome, successful, your awesome mixer god side. For what happens for me is I'm in a room. We have a nice venue. It seats 400. It's very nice, but and you'll get 25 people in the audience. They're all community members. You got some rock band on stage. Maybe it's a student band. Maybe it's not that good, but you can have just a powerful moment. This kid, fat cheeks. He looks like he's 15 years old and he's sitting at sometimes we have high school kids come in, and my job is actually to give them a taste of this, to show them how cool it can be. Because you guys know we're here right now because we love this. Yep. And that moment of, oh my God, I can do this. I love this. And then that's almost more powerful than whether or not they learn their microphones or they learn what a cardioid subarray is or what blah, 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 all this technical stuff. It's to feel the love, because once you have the love, you're willing to do all the hard work it takes to get
absolutely, yeah.
So
yeah, there was a funny moment where I think I realized that once you get past all the technical stuff, how to run a console, how to EQ things, you kind of suddenly realize that your job is emotional delivery, and that in itself is a strange concept. The concept that there's emotion coming off the stage and there's emotion inherent in that song, and your job is to make everybody else feel it. And that works from 2 people in the audience to 200,000 people in the audience. And it's the same thing when you suddenly get to see somebody's face, that they understand the emotion and the idea behind it. It's kind of a beautiful thing. And that for me was a realizing moment. And I swear it took me 10, 15 years before I realized that was my job, rather than, making something sound cool.
Yeah, well, Michael, was it Chris Mitchell who wrote the article about? Yep. Yeah. So Chris Mitchell has this great article on ProSoundWeb about, and I forget, you probably know the title exactly, but that exact thing of reading the audience, right? Part of our jobs is to read the audience and feel that emotion, and if you're not part of that mechanism that's invoking emotion, if you're not able to feel that, you're probably missing the bar in terms of getting that show across. And so it's, damn it.
I don't want to make the joke I was about to make, because nowadays if anyone coughs, you assume the worst.
No. So, it's funny. as being audio engineers, you end up mixing tours, festivals, one-offs that you maybe don't necessarily appreciate, or you wouldn't necessarily listen to the music on a given basis, right, or a daily basis, right? But I found that like you have to learn to appreciate the art of whatever it is you're mixing, regardless of whether you listen on a daily basis or not, right? So, and a lot of the stuff I ended up mixing in my past wasn't maybe something I would daily listen to, but I learned to appreciate the art that was getting put into it, and in that moment, you have to really put yourself in that place, and like for instance, and this is not a name drop there, but like Josh Groban, right? Like it's it's not music that I would listen to in my car, right? Very orchestral, very, big singer-songwriter, a popra is what they called it when we were out there, right?
Yes, that's
right?
amazing.
Or they called him the male Celine Dion, is what they called him, right? And
that's a good term. I like it.
Yeah, and it's like, look, but like when you are in that moment in that show, like you got to get into a zone, get into that space. Or if you're doing R&B, or if you're doing funk, or if you're doing hip hop, whatever genres you're doing, regardless of what you listen to on a daily basis, you kind of have to become one with that show. And I found that like if there's been shows where I've like started to check out, like, and it almost correlates with you start getting that feedback of like, hey, people are not as happy, or the vocals aren't there because you're kind of checking out. So like I think it's part of our jobs is to get into that seat, and you need to be able to be resonating with the people that are around you and see their movement. And I find this especially true like in the house of worship world too. Like there's obviously a very big emotional experience happening there, and I make it a part of my job when I am mixing house of worship to like pay attention to the audience, and if like a majority of them are not engaged, I start to think if maybe that part of that is me, and maybe it's not, but I mean that's
no. That's totally right, man. That's the right perspective to have. I've had that same notion, and sometimes that translates to me having to speak to the artist after the show and say, maybe we need to change something in the set list, because at this point, this is where everyone goes to the bar and stops paying attention. This is where everyone pulls out their phone. Mind you, I have the advantage position of being in the middle of the crowd, and I can see all this very clearly. But that's exactly the right perspective. If there's a spot in the show or any event where suddenly it seems that people aren't paying attention, you do have the ability, as the person controlling what they're hearing, to find something exciting in what's going on and give them something to pay attention to. Mm-hmm. Or maybe the arrangement as a whole needs to change, or maybe the set list as a whole needs to change. But it is the right question to be asking. Do I need to change something with what I'm doing in order to get people engaged again?
The beginning of Shannon Slayton's book, and we've had Shannon on the podcast, and he's a very, very accomplished Broadway sound designer and mixer. And he starts off his book by talking about the example of mixing a song, I think from Les Mis, where he says, I can give you examples of mixes that I've done that were technically perfect, but they just didn't, I knew that I should have pushed the reverb 1 more dB or something like that. It didn't have that audience impact that he was looking for. And I think about that a lot, which is beyond all that technical stuff, that's really our tool set with which we have to make an emotional impact. And I was thinking about the time years ago, I mixed a production of actually it was Les Mis, and the bit at the end, the very, very end of the show, when they all come out and they all sing, can you hear the people sing? And it's like the curtain call, and you see all of these people who have died over the course of the 2.5 hour show, and you realize how much life was lost during this story that's being told. And I said, I'm going to do something that's technically really stupid at this moment. And it was a small enough house, it was 700 seats, small enough you could do this. I muted the PA at that point. And so this whole acoustic reality that you've become accustomed to for 2.5 hours is gone like that. And everyone just wham, they lean forward in their seats because now they're hearing for the first time unamplified chorus coming off the stage. And it's a complete paradigm shift, and it just knocks people for a loop. And it ended up being a very, very powerful moment. And you don't get there by asking yourself, what's the most technically appropriate choice right now?
Definitely.
And that was one of my, it was stupid, but it was one of my favorite things that I've gotten to do from a sound design perspective is completely remove myself from the equation and turn the PA off. And it worked really well. And so, to me, that's, you guys know more than anything. I love the technical stuff, but always you have to keep the end goal in sight, which is what's the artistic goal here.
I love that idea, man. I think that's awesome. It reminds me of like, Mark Carolyn, he mixes Muse. He keeps his finger on the master fader often. And he'll take his master fader and write it down for verses and then just blast people with, impact on choruses, right? And if you think about it from a technical perspective, that doesn't feel very correct, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a blood. Yeah.
And the board recording probably seems crazy, right? But the emotional delivery in the moment at the time is amazing,
Yep.
And just out of curiosity, do you know if that's a conversation that the muses had with him on what they want, or is it something he chose to bring to the table and they liked it? Do you know how that went?
I don't know the answer to that, but I'll have to ask him. I mean, he's been with Muse for forever, basically since they were a baby band. So I imagine that it was something that just kind of developed together, and they're all about impact. And even the visuals of their show, there's so much stuff visually happening. I don't think they're going, I need my board recording to be perfect.
Right.
I think they're going, I need this to feel like this hits, and I think I need it to feel right. And if that's the way to do it, then that's the way to do it, right?
It's something you can do with live, and there's such a tendency with the plug-in world and all that, and the all the studio engineers becoming live engineers, and all the things that have happened in the last 10 years in our industry, to squash the front of house mix, to make it sound like the record, to make it sound flat and dynamically lacking, and you can do that with live. You can, and I think Dave Ratt had an article years ago about designing the sculpting your set list with level. It's a fantastic idea. I remember I used to do that with the band I toured with, and you gotta have the quiet song before the big song, and you gotta have the end song and all that. But we can do that with live. We can have that impact if it's triple forte all the time.
Right. I mean, that's almost homogenizing the whole experience. If it's the same all the time, it doesn't really have impact anymore, right?
I mean, and to go down the technical side, I mean, when we I shouldn't even go there. I'm among giants. I'm not going to talk about mixing.
Well, I'll say this: when I working on Smart SPL, I started mixing with the timeline plot in my view as a mixer, and it started off at first just so I could generate data to test the software. But I very quickly realized, no, this is an amazing mixing tool, because looking at a number on a screen tells you one thing, but looking at that trend over 10 minutes, 15, whatever it is. Wow. I mean, I will never go back to mixing without that visually, because you really become very, very aware of how you're sculpting the contour of the show. And then you're looking at the set list going, okay, the big hit's coming up in 2 songs. So I'm going to bring it down. So when I jump back to this level, it's going to really hit. And it's something that I really encourage people to try, having that SPL context. And it has definitely been a game changer for me.
As long as you don't take it the wrong direction too, and try to target a loudness, and then which is what we do in broadcast, like trying to achieve -24 for the length of your show, and you actually find yourself taking out all the dynamics because you're trying to target this one thing. And this is happening on records as well, with streaming services and all that. We just the tools are. It's great to have the meters, but don't let the meter tell you what to do as well.
Well,
that's sort of the micro of the Smart conversation as a whole,
Right. Smart doesn't tell you actually what to do. Right.
Yeah.
And it's like a voltmeter. You plug it into the wall. It doesn't tell you what to do with that information. Is 98 okay in the wall? I don't know. Is it? We know no, but it doesn't tell you that no, that's not good.
Right.
So
no. As an operator, whether it's system engineer or mixing or whatever I'm doing, I want as much context and as much information as I can possibly get. And my philosophy is the more information I have, the better decision I'm going to make. But it's my decision to make, right? And that's sort of where I'm at. And I think a nice place to really tie this off, this whole conversation, Victor Wooten has a book called The Music Lesson.
Oh, it's such a good book,
fantastic book. And he talks about the 4 rooms of knowledge, right? And you start off, and it's the first room of knowledge is you don't know what you don't know. And he uses the metaphor of the little kid playing air guitar. And he has no idea what's so complicated about anything about music theory or playing guitar and how many hours of practice. He's just having a blast. He has no idea. And then you start to learn a little bit, and then you realize how much there is to it. He says, so now you know what you don't know. And so you're in the second room of knowledge. And then you study and you work hard and you practice. And then eventually you become well versed in the topic, or an expert in the subject matter, or accomplished, and now you know what you know, and you have a good command of your knowledge. And he says, but the fourth room of knowledge is when you get back to that state where it's all in the back of your mind, it's no longer in your conscious forefront, and you don't know what you know, and it becomes just a subconscious tool set. And I think that's the goal where we want to get in terms of being able to operate your console fluently, being able to use all these technical tricks in a mix. It all has to go back to, let me master this stuff to such a degree that I don't have to think about it, and I can get back to focusing on that immediate moment of passion that started this whole thing off, the kid with the air guitar. Let's get back there, but let's do it with this foundation of knowledge behind us. So there's my soapbox for the evening. You knew there was one coming.
That kind of brings me back to the thing I say all the time, is that a console is like a guitar. If you have to think about how to play the guitar every time you want to play a song, you're going to be a terrible musician. You're going to play a terrible song. So if you learn your instrument, which in this context of what we're speaking about now is a console, then you don't have to think about how to do it. You just do it. And then it suddenly becomes artistic and creative, as opposed to this weird technical challenge.
Yeah.
And it lines up with that book. Yeah.
No, and it's this is, I don't want to go down a rabbit trail because I know we're already maybe running a little later.
It's my bedtime, Chris. It's my bedtime.
No, but like I think Ryan, actually last time we talked with you, one of the things we talked about is like that's what makes teaching mixing so hard, right? Is like because just like playing an instrument, you get to a point of where like you're not necessarily thinking about it. Your fingers are just moving. You're grabbing knobs because you're making decisions. Just the same when you're driving, right? You don't think about when you're turning a turn signal. You don't think about when you're changing lanes and stuff. It's just you're just doing it, right? And so that but it coupled with knowing the piece of gear you're on marries that up so much more, of making that so effortless, of being able to just that art and craft that you created, knowing, and then marrying that with knowing the tool that you're using. It's a beautiful thing.
Definitely.
There it is. Well, I think that's a great place to. I'm going to bed. No, thanks everyone for joining us.
I appreciate y'all for hanging out. Everybody's watching. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah. And
Ryan, Eric, Hannah, thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you guys. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Good to chat.
Take care, guys. See you.
Bye, everybody.
Cheers.